Are the boys still waiting outside?
Oh, the boys. I forgot them in
Long before the internet could expose every hidden scandal, long before tabloids went digital and secrets could travel around the world in seconds, there existed a place where desire had no rules and hunger had no limits. Hollywood in its golden age was not merely a dream factory. It was a pressure cooker of ambition, loneliness, and raw human appetite, sealed shut by studio contracts and cracked open only in the darkest hours of the night. The men and women who ruled those silver screens were larger than life on celluloid, but behind the velvet ropes of their private worlds, they lived with a ferocity that would have shattered their carefully polished public images. This is not a story about fame. This is a story about flesh and fire, about the ones who could not stop, who did not want to stop, who chased pleasure the way other people chase God, desperately, repeatedly, and with absolute conviction that the next encounter would finally fill the hollow space inside. These are the 22 most notorious, most reckless, most burning souls that Hollywood's golden age ever tried to contain and failed. Joan Crawford did not seduce people. She consumed them. She arrived in Hollywood as a dancer from Texas with nothing but her body, her hunger, and will made of iron, and she used all three with surgical precision. Crawford's list of lovers reads like a Hollywood directory. Actors, directors, producers, co-stars, rivals, and anyone else who made the mistake of catching her eye. She pursued affairs with the same obsessive energy she brought to her craft, relentlessly, jealously, and without apology. Early in her career, she reportedly carried on simultaneous affairs with multiple studio executives, understanding that physical currency could open doors that talent alone could not. Her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks Jr. barely slowed her, and her relationship with Clark Gable, her most celebrated affair, reportedly continued long after both had moved on publicly. She once admitted she lived by one rule: take what you need before it disappears. In Hollywood's golden age, nobody took more than Joan Crawford. If Hollywood had a patron saint of reckless desire, his name was Errol Flynn. The Australian-born swashbuckler moved through the film industry like a sailor through port towns, landing briefly, leaving chaos behind, and never looking back. Flynn's appetites were the stuff of genuine legend, documented not just in gossip columns, but in court documents, including a statutory rape trial in 1942 that somehow only cemented his notoriety rather than destroying it. He threw parties at his Mulholland Drive home that became notorious even among Hollywood's most jaded insiders. Events where clothing was optional and restraint was the only thing unwelcome. Flynn himself wrote candidly in his autobiography about his countless conquests across 3 continents, boasting about encounters that ranged from starlets to aristocrats to strangers he met on a Tuesday afternoon. His famous phrase, "I like my whiskey old and my women young," wasn't a joke. It was a mission statement. Mae West did not stumble into sexuality. She built an entire empire out of it. At a time when women in Hollywood were expected to play one of 2 roles, the innocent or the tragic, West invented a third option: the knowing, laughing, absolutely shameless seductress who was in on the joke and running the punchline. Her affairs were numerous and deliberate, and she made no effort whatsoever to hide them. She kept a rotating cast of younger men throughout much of her adult life, a preference she referred to without embarrassment in interviews and in her own writings. West was arrested for obscenity, censored by studios, and investigated by moral watchdog organizations, yet none of it slowed her down or changed her perspective by a single degree. She once said the only difference between her and other women was that she was honest about what she wanted. And in Golden Age Hollywood, that honesty was treated as the most radical act imaginable. Clara Bow was the original it girl, and the it that made her famous was not merely charisma. She carried within her a sexual energy so uncontained that it leaked off the screen and into the national conversation, making her simultaneously the most desired and most condemned woman in America. Bow's affairs were constant and overlapping, with directors, co-stars, football teams, and allegedly the entire USC Trojan squad, a rumor that followed her for decades regardless of its factual basis. The tragedy of Clara was that her appetites were matched by an emotional fragility just as enormous. She wanted love desperately but kept finding only its imitation. Her private secretary, Daisy DeVoe, sold her most intimate secrets to tabloids, detailing Bao's encounters with names that shocked even hardened Hollywood veterans. The exposure broke something in Clara that never fully healed. She retired young, married, and retreated from the world, but the hunger never left her eyes. Marlon Brando was the most complicated entry on any list of Hollywood's sexual legends because, unlike most of his peers, Brando was genuinely curious rather than simply predatory. His affairs spanned genders, races, nationalities, and social categories in a way that was unusual even by Hollywood's elastic standards. Brando himself spoke in interviews about the fluidity of his attractions, at a time when such admissions could have ended careers. He pursued relationships with the same intensity he brought to method acting, total immersion, no boundaries, absolute presence, and then moved on with the same swiftness when the scene was over. His biographers have cataloged dozens of documented relationships and suggested that the undocumented ones would fill another volume. Co-stars, extras, directors, foreign dignitaries, strangers on film sets in the Philippines and Paris, Brando's appetite appeared genuinely boundless. The darkness of his story is that no amount of connection seemed to quiet whatever aloneness drove him toward the next encounter. Tallulah Bankhead arrived in Hollywood from Broadway already notorious, already unapologetic, and already possessed of a reputation that made studio publicists sweat through their suits. She was bisexual decades before that word entered polite conversation, aggressive about her desires in ways that shocked even her closest friends, and utterly, completely indifferent to what anyone thought about any of it. Bankhead's parties were legendary events where the guest list was determined by attractiveness and willingness rather than fame or social standing. She pursued women with the same directness she brought to pursuing men, and she kept no secrets about either. She once told an interviewer, with complete seriousness, that she had no regrets about any of her romances except the ones that ended. Her career was ultimately more damaged by her refusal to perform respectability than by any single scandal. Tallulah Bankhead proved that the most threatening thing a woman could do in Golden Age Hollywood was simply refuse to be ashamed. Ava Gardner came from a tobacco farm in North Carolina and arrived in Hollywood with a face that stopped traffic and an emotional landscape that could swallow men whole. Her marriages to Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and Frank Sinatra were hurricanes, each one defined by jealousy, infidelity, passion, and a fundamental incompatibility between her need for freedom and her need for devotion simultaneously. Between and during those marriages, she conducted affairs with matadors, actors, musicians, and anyone else who could match her physical and emotional intensity for at least a few weeks. Her relationship with Sinatra became the most mythologized affair in Hollywood history, partly because they were equally matched in desire, equally incapable of fidelity, and equally unable to leave each other alone. Gardner herself said late in life that she had loved too many men the wrong way and the right men the wrong way, and that she had never once regretted the burning, only the ashes. George Raft came to Hollywood carrying the streets of Hell's Kitchen in his pockets, and the streets of Hell's Kitchen never entirely left. His friendship with real organized crime figures gave his on-screen gangsters an authenticity that other actors could only imitate, and it gave his personal life a recklessness that other men could only fantasize about. Raft moved through women the way he moved through film roles, with complete commitment in the moment and complete detachment the morning after. His affairs with some of Hollywood's most celebrated actresses were documented extensively in the gossip press, but the ones that never made the papers were reportedly far more numerous and far less discreet. He gambled compulsively, lived extravagantly, and loved carelessly, spending a fortune on women in nightclubs and ending his life nearly broke. The tragedy of George Raft was not that he wanted too much, but that he never once stopped wanting long enough to figure out what he actually needed. Hedy Lamarr was the most underestimated figure in Golden Age Hollywood because the world was too busy staring at her face to notice that the mind behind it was running a completely different operation. She escaped a controlling first marriage in Austria by seducing and then fleeing her own husband, arriving in America with a reputation already scarlet and a determination that nothing would constrain her again. Her Hollywood affairs were conducted with the same analytical precision she brought to her patent on frequency-hopping communication technology, identifying targets, establishing contact, executing with efficiency, and moving on once the experiment was complete. She collected powerful men partly for pleasure and partly for protection, understanding that in a world run by men, the fastest currency was desire. Lamar married 6 times and conducted relationships beyond counting, always searching, her biographers suggest, for someone who could match her on every level, intellectually, physically, emotionally, and never quite finding the complete package. Clark Gable wore his virility like a second costume, something the studio helped construct, but something he filled out with genuine enthusiasm. The King of Hollywood was also, by most accounts, one of its most compulsive romantics, a man who could not leave a film set without having pursued at least one co-star and could not attend a party without leaving with someone's telephone number or their heart or both. His affairs with Joan Crawford were the most documented, but the complete list included Lana Turner, Carole Lombard before she became his wife, and a lengthy parade of women whose names never made the official record. Gable's particular brand of appetite was wrapped in charm, so effective that most of his conquests reported the experience favorably even when it ended badly. He had a gift for making women feel chosen, which made the inevitable departure all the more disorienting. The King of Hollywood was generous with desire and stingy with permanence. Lupe Valles blazed through Golden Age Hollywood with the energy of a woman who knew exactly how little time she had and intended to fill every second of it. The Mexican actress brought a physical and emotional expressiveness to her personal life that matched anything she put on screen, conducting her affairs with Gary Cooper, Johnny Weissmuller, and numerous others at a volume and visibility that shocked even her colleagues. Cooper reportedly said that Valles was the most passionate woman he had ever encountered and also the most exhausting. Her relationship with Weissmuller, whom she married and divorced twice, was a spectacle of jealousy, physical confrontation, and intense reconciliation that kept studio lawyers and gossip columnists equally busy. Lupe never